So recently I started playing Ark again, which I haven't done since Ark Ascended came out. Landing back on the island felt like a completely new game again. There were all these new items and I had no idea what they did, until one specific thing caught my eye. A locomotive and train tracks. Immediately, my first thought was, can I build a train track around the entire island? At first, I dismissed the idea because it was stupid, but I really wanted to know how long it would take, how many resources it would cost, and exactly how long the train would take to travel across the entire island. So, I decided to make my insane idea come to life. Okay, so today I will be building a train track around the entire map, simply because I can. First, let's check the resource requirements. The train tracks and the locomotive unlock at level 43 and requires 200 metal ingots, 400 wood and 50 cementing paste per piece. So we had our basic blueprint. Now, the resource that was going to be the biggest hassle was metal. It takes a while to harvest and even longer to refine. I needed a dedicated place to farm and smelt it. Currently, I live right here and there aren't many metal nodes around. I had to build a temporary metal harvesting and refining station just for this project. The location I chose for this was the Volcano, as it was the densest cluster of metal nodes on the island, at least that I know of. So we had our location, but what takes even longer than harvesting is refining. It is insanely slow, and I quickly realized that regular refining forges won't be able to keep up with the production speed required for these tracks. Now, there were two other options that I knew of. The Industrial Forge, a much more advanced and most importantly faster version of the refining forge. And there was also the Steam Forge, an even more advanced version. However, the Steam Forge requires Element to run, a highly advanced alien material that requires you to defeat bosses to get. And at this point in my Ark world, I wasn't even remotely prepared for boss fights. So I settled in the middle with the Industrial Forge. Before I could really kick off this project, I needed one more thing. A good Argentavis with most of its stats pumped into weight to transport heavy resources to and from my metal station, which would temporarily also become my crafting base. Now, I could have settled for Quetzal that I already tamed, but it had just one really small issue. Can you spot it? It's so mind-numbingly slow. With the absolute mountain of traveling I would have to do for this project, it was a far better decision to get an Argentavis. Now, I already had one RG, but it wasn't great, and that's because it wasn't really leveled into weight. So, my goal was to tame another high level one and breed them together to get a baby, imprint it to get better stats and dump all the points into weight. So, off I went to the Winter Biome to find a high level Argentavis. Luckily, it didn't take long before I found a level 100, the max level on the island. I quickly tranked it out, tamed it and started breeding. Now, Ark breeding is completely chance based, so it took a couple of tries to combine the best stats onto a single baby. But once I did, I fully raised it, took it on walks, cuddled with it and doing everything I needed to get that 100 imprint bonus. Once it grew up, I killed some Terrazino babies with it to get a massive amount of XP, and soon the bird was ready. Because it could carry an absurd amount of weight, I gave it an appropriate name, the Carrier Pigeon. After that, I gathered all the remaining resources I had at my main base to craft the Industrial Forge. I grabbed my Ankylo and my Mammoth and we were off to the Volcano, everything I needed to get started. I set up the station and went on my first metal run, but as soon as I finished and placed the raw metal into the Industrial Forge, I realized that just one forge was definitely not going to cut it. I decided I had to farm even more, and after long excruciating hours, I crafted 3 more Industrial Forges. So now I had 4 Industrial Forges running simultaneously, and for anyone who hasn't played this game before or only played a little, in most single player worlds you basically never need more than one of these, and I was using 4. This should have been a massive warning sign for what I was getting into, but I hadn't realized that yet. Next, I went on a massive metal run to fill up all 4 forges, but as I mentioned before, metal wasn't the only resource I needed. I also required wood and cementing paste. Wood, even though though I needed a lot of it, wasn't complicated. I just used my mammoth, spamming its spacebar to clear out the entire forest. Cementing paste on the other hand was a completely different story. In Ark, there are basically two ways to get cementing paste: raiding beaver dams or crafting it manually from chitin and stone. For a project of this size, beaver dams were definitely not going to be enough. So I had to go with manual craft. Stone wasn't an issue. I could just take my Doedicurus, hit a few rocks and get thousands of it instant. But chitin was a nightmare. I needed to kill a lot of bugs. And bugs aren't exactly a common spawn across them except for one place, in the caves. So that became the main plan. I took my Megatherium, a giant bug killing slot that gets a massive harvesting bonus for chitin, and headed down into the caves. I killed anything that moved, brought the chitin home, farmed the stone and crafted enormous amounts of paste in my chemistry bench. With all the basic resources finally accounted for, a brutal gameplay cycle was born. I would hop on Ark, do a metal run, fill up the forges to smelt, take my Megatherium to the caves for chitin, bring it back to my original base, use my RG and Doedicurus to farm stone, craft the cementing paste, fly back to my metal production zone and harvest wood to finally craft the rails. Once the rails were created, I then had to farm more wood, thatch and fiber to craft the wooden pillars to place the tracks on. I'd craft all the pillars I needed, head out, place them and then cycle would repeat. Again and again and again. Now that you have a rough idea of what the building process looked like, let's look at the actual plan. This is the map of the island. It's quite big. Instead of just building a simple, boring square of rails around the coast, I want to give myself a few strict requirements for the route. Requirement number 1. The rails had to cut through every major biome in the game. We have the basic jungle biome, the redwoods in the center, the swamp surrounding it, and the winter biome in the upper left corner. The tracks had to cross all of them. Requirement number 2. The tracks had to loop around each of the 3 obelisks, keeping them on the inside of the railway system. And the final requirement was connecting our major hubs. The tracks had to pass directly through my main base, cut through the Volcano metal refining station, and hit the actual highest point of the entire map, the very peak of the volcano. Now, there were a few ways to connect these points, but this is the route I choose. I would start at my metal refining station, head straight down to my main base, curve around the green obelisk, head to the bottom left corner around the islands and wrap around the red obelisk. From there, the tracks would cut through the swamp straight into the redwoods. After crossing the river, the tracks would pass under the first section of the railway and head around the right side of the winter biome. From there, I'd build upward to the top of the snow mountain, wrap around the blue obelisk and come down. Finally, the tracks would cross over the river, climb the volcano, pass under my starter area again to create a second loop, hit the very peak of the volcano and then come right back down and connect to the star, completing the loop. With the plan set, it was time to execute. After endless hours of metal farming, caving, deforesting and placing tracks, it was finally done. It looked like this. As you can see, it wraps around every obelisk, hits every major biome and connects my base, my metal station and the top of the volcano. It was beautiful. Now it was the time to test it out and see how long it actually takes for the train to travel from the beginning to the end. So here we go. Okay, so now let's actually check out how long does it take to travel around the entire map. Currently my estimation is like 50 minutes because it's a really long map. Yeah, let's just hop in and see it through. While that is playing in the background, let's talk about the absurd cost of this project. During the entire grind, I crafted around 1,327 rails, with each costing 200 ingots, 50 paste and 400 wood. I used 5,475 pillars, each costing 40 wood, 10 thatch and 7 fiber. But that's not all. Factoring the 4 industrial forgers and the locomotive itself, our grand total is 275,200 ingots, 747,600 wood, 72,250 paste, 54,750 thatch, 38,325 fiber, and some other less significant resources. It perfectly shows the absolute scale of this project. Now, let's return to the final lap time for the train. Okay, so now I did a full circle, and I don't know exactly, I'm gonna put it like on the screen somewhere. It took, I would say, around 25 minutes to 30 minutes. I'm not completely sure, I didn't really check the time, but around that time. And yeah, This has not been worth it at all. This took probably 40 hours to just make the track and about probably 20 to edit. So yeah, if you enjoyed seeing me waste basically 60 hours of my life, subscribe please, and like, and leave a nice comment, because this was not worth it. Okay, bye.